Horus's endurance is incredibly strong. The pile of maids on the ground is the best proof. Then, from more maids came to give him a baptism. He is Horus, the son of the most powerful god king in ancient Egypt. He has golden armor and can transform into a divine form at any time. They protect the weak humans. Today is the day of his coronation. Just as the old god king was usurping the throne, his uncle, the desert god Set, came with a large army to seize the throne. He took out the god-killing sword and stabbed the old god king to death, and threatened all the nobles present to submit to him, otherwise, the men would be killed and the women would be reduced to slaves. Horus, who was beside him, couldn't stand it anymore and immediately picked up the holy spear and started fighting. Set came prepared, knowing that Horus's eye of power was too formidable. The soldiers raised their holy shields one after another, and the incoming light completely restrained Horus's abilities. Horus had no choice but to transform into his divine form, and Set followed closely behind. The two mighty gods fought for 300 rounds with no clear winner. Just as Horus was about to use his ultimate move, the soldiers in red armor raised their holy shields once again. Horus was once again affected by the light. Seizing the opportunity, Set used a move to devour Horus's soul. Horus was forced out of his physical body and his eyes were forcibly gouged out. Once the eye of power was separated from him, Horus lost all his magical power. Set raised his scepter, preparing to execute Horus. His old lover, the goddess of love Hathor, kneeled and pleaded for him, which saved Horus's life. Failed Horus was thrown into the tomb of the old god king, never to be seen again. Henceforth, he disappeared from the world. On the other hand, Set ascended to the throne. Under his rule, the people suffered, and he shamelessly diverted national resources, all for the sake of constructing a tower to showcase his own achievements. Faced with such tyranny, a boy named Beck refused to accept this fate. He decided to steal the Eye of Power and overthrow Set's rule. At night, he secretly jumped into a convoy transporting treasures. Together with the gold, he was stolen into a secret chamber. His objective this time was not the jewels in front of him, but the Eye of Power at the end of the passage. To obtain it, he had to overcome each deadly mechanism. One wrong move, and he would become a feast for the scorpions. Beck proceeded with extreme caution, knowing that even the slightest touch of the shadow would trigger the mechanisms on the ground. To minimize the range of the shadow, he held the torch high above his head. He successfully passed the first level and proceeded to the second level. The giant statues on both sides swiftly swung towards Beck. Fortunately, with his exceptional skills, Beck managed to navigate the second level with only millimeters to spare. He arrived at the most terrifying level, where any contact with the floor would make it collapse. Beck had no choice but to sprint with all his might, and then he leaped up to seize the Eye of Power. However, when he returned home, he found himself surrounded by a group of soldiers. He raised the Eye of Power, blinding the soldiers. And quickly fled with his girlfriend Zaya, but unfortunately, Zaya was struck in the chest by a bolt from a sword crossbow and fell before Beck's eyes. Beck hurriedly rushed to the burial chamber to find the fallen god King Horus. He intended to ask Horus to use the power of the Eye of Power to resurrect Zaya, who had been taken to the gates of the underworld.
Give them to me.
Not yet.
Give me my eyes.
I have a proposition.
You bargain with me?
Gold I can steal.
Horus agreed to Beck's request, but they needed the authority of the king to approach the gates of the underworld.
Anubis, come forth.
However, with only one eye and insufficient strength to oppose the brutal Set, they decided to seek the power of the sun god Ra. The two of them climbed a steep mountain with their bare hands. At the mountain's peak stood a portal leading to the solar system. The Divine King opened his arms and instantly transformed into his divine form. He then grabbed Beck and brought him into the Milky Way galaxy. They arrived at a floating spaceship. The sun god Ra, who guards the order of the universe, was here. Every day, his task was to eliminate hundreds of chaotic behemoths. Horus wanted to ask him to bestow powerful divine power to overthrow the rule of Set. However, the sun god Ra needed to maintain balance between the planets. He simply didn't have the energy to deal with such trivial matters. Horus had to come up with another plan. He took out a divine bottle and collected some water of the gods. He intended to go back and extinguish the fire of the desert in order to weaken Set's power. During this period, Set kept expanding his power.
The last of the rebel gods.
He had no pity for his former wife and mercilessly cut off her wings.
That's why.
The two who obtained the holy water return to Earth once again. When Set learns that Horus has retrieved an eye, he sends a Minotaur warrior to kill him.
Where is the Eye of Horus?
Right here.
Horus resolves the crisis with ease. Set sensed the crisis and arranged 2 desert snakes to eliminate them. Running quickly together like that is not a viable solution. Horus quickly came up with a plan. He let Beck attract the big snake while he took the opportunity to attack the snake charmer. Thus, 1 person and 1 snake fell into the cliff. At the last moment, Horus jumped back up, but as soon as he turned around, the other big snake was coming towards him. Suddenly, a woman appeared and walked towards him. She stood calmly in front of the snake, her eyes shimmering with golden light, and uttered a sentence. The angry big snake immediately spewed out flames and roasted itself to death. This woman was the goddess of love Hathor, possessing enchanting eyes and also being Horus's former lover. The goddess of love told Horus that Set had completely gone mad. He killed all the old gods who refused to submit and took possession of all the women in the palace. She couldn't accept such rule and decided to come and help Horus overthrow him. Then the 3 of them planned to go to the desert tower to extinguish the fire of the desert, but they had to answer the riddles of the lion-faced giant, otherwise, they couldn't enter. They then found the god of wisdom Thoth, who was the smartest person in all of ancient Egypt. As a reward for the dance of the goddess of love, they asked him to join them on their journey to the desert tower. But Thoth failed to answer the question correctly several times in a row.
Purity. Yes. Maybe stop thinking like a god that I might.
The giant became increasingly restless. The pressure on Horus also gradually increased.
You are tomorrow!
After solving the riddles, Horus took the divine water and walked towards the fire seed. Suddenly, a trap sprung from the ground. Thoth had been waiting here all along. Then, he took the most powerful brain of the god of wisdom Thoth and poured the divine water on the ground. He also told Beck that Horus had been using him. He would never be able to save his girlfriend Zaya, and she would not come back to life either. After saying this, he confidently left. But he never expected that Horus managed to open the cage. He lifted a stone slab as a cover and quickly led everyone away. Beck was heartbroken, feeling used and about to lose the love of his life. The goddess of love felt distressed in her heart. She summoned the desert god of death, Anubis. She decided to give Beck's girlfriend Zaya the ancestral gold bracelet as compensation for Horus's mistake. This place is called the Gate of the Underworld, the final destination for all souls. But the judgment here is not based on who you are, but on how much treasure you have. A merchant offered a box of jewels and gained the right to choose their next life. A woman offered a ring and she instantly turned into ashes. Next, it was Zaya's turn, but she had no money. The outcome for her was easy to predict. At that moment, Beck appeared just in time and presented the precious bracelet, allowing her to have a better afterlife. The gate of reincarnation suddenly ruptured, and the gates of the dead came under the control of a certain power. It turns out that in order to become more powerful, Set installed the brain of Thoth, the god of wisdom, and replaced his own heart with the heart of eternity, as well as the other eye of Horus. He merged them and became the most powerful god king. Even the cosmic sun god Ra was injured, and the sun staff was taken away. Taking this opportunity, Set released a chaos behemoth, preparing to create a new world. Now, the only one who can turn the situation around is Horus. They first infiltrated the Tower of the Gods. At the top of the tower, Set was absorbing the energy of the sun. Horus quickly arrived at the top to stop Set's ambitions. But now, he was no match for Set. Beck took out a rope and saved Horus just a second before the blade struck, but he himself was captured by Set. Beck took the opportunity to remove the Eye of Power from the top of Set's head and threw it to Horus, but he himself was about to fall off the tower. On one side was the Eye of Power, restoring strength, while on the other side was a friend who had gone through life and death together. At a critical moment, Horus abandoned the Eye of Power and rushed towards Beck without hesitation. Then, both of them fell from the high tower together. Unexpectedly, Horus regained his divine powers and caught the falling Beck, carefully placing him aside. Horus had always believed that the Eye of Power was the source of his strength, but he realized that true power comes from having a heart that protects his people. Horus returned to the battlefield and engaged in a final showdown with Set. He seized the opportunity to lock Set's hand and pushed him into the sky. Then, he broke Set's wings. Set, now wingless, quickly plummeted. Horus took the sun staff and ended Set's life with his own hands. The tower he had built himself became his tomb. Horus then went to the cosmos and returned the sun staff to the sun god Ra. He drove the chaos behemoth back into the darkness. Back on Earth, Horus received the love and admiration of his people. He obtained the other eye from the hand of a little girl. He came to Beck's side, but Beck, having suffered serious injuries, left with a sense of satisfaction. Horus buried Beck and Zaya together. Suddenly, a strong light appeared behind him. The sun god Ra appeared, intending to bestow greater divine power upon Horus, but Horus desired nothing, only hoping that the couple behind him could be resurrected. The sun god Ra granted his request. Beck and Zaya miraculously came back to life. Horus, who was deeply loved by his subjects, became the sacred king of ancient Egypt.